After my wife's funeral, I didn't tell my daughter about the little church. My wife bought me in Wisconsin. I saw Randy's truck before I heard it. That ugly black thing came up the gravel slow, like he already owned the lane. My wife had been in the ground for 4 days. 4. I was standing at the sink in my socks holding a coffee mug I'd reheated twice and still hadn't finished, and when that truck rolled past the split-rail fence, I got this tired feeling in my knees. Not fear exactly. More like my body was saying, here we go. Here comes the nonsense. There are people who show up after a funeral with casseroles and paper plates and stories. Randy showed up with a manila folder. I opened the front door before he knocked. Cold March wind came in around him, and behind him was my daughter, Kelsey, pulling her coat tight and looking like she hadn't slept either. Her mascara was smudged. Randy looked shaved and rested. That about tells you the whole marriage. "Morning, Don," he said. "I was 68 years old. Nobody called me Don except people selling me something." "Doug," I said. Kelsey hugged me for real. Pressed her face into my shoulder the way she used to when a storm knocked the power out. I held on maybe a second too long. She pulled back first. "How you doing?" she asked. "I keep opening cabinets for no reason." She nodded like that made sense. Randy was already inside. My wife, Marlene, hated that. People stepping into a house like they were entering a gas station. This farmhouse sat outside Cape Girardeau on 12 acres of nothing dramatic. A pond that went green in August, a machine shed with one crooked door, 2 pecan trees that dropped limbs every time the weather guy said light breeze. Marlene and I bought it in 1993 and fixed most of it ourselves, so yeah, it was home. We sat because Randy had decided we were sitting. Kelsey perched on the edge of the couch, picking at the seam of her sleeve. Randy laid the folder on the coffee table and squared it with both hands. "Doug," he said, "we need to talk practical." "About what?" "About your situation. You're out here alone now. This place is a lot for one person. The property, the upkeep, the distance from town. Kelsey's worried." "The furnace was serviced in November," I said. "Roof got patched last spring. Ray bush hogs the back field and takes hay off it. The septic was pumped in June." Randy smiled the smile of a man explaining weather to a dog. "This isn't about the septic." Kelsey looked at her hands. I could feel the insult then, small but sharp. "Your mother's been gone 4 days," I said to Kelsey. "Not him. I'm supposed to look rough." "Dad, nobody's saying." "There are good communities in Jackson," Randy cut in. "Independent living, some with medical staff on site. In this market, honestly, this is the time to move on something like this. Move on." Marlene's side of the bed still had the dent in it. I set my mug down. "I want him out of my house." Randy blinked. "Excuse me?" "You can stay," I told Kelsey. "He goes." Silence. Then Randy said, "I know you're emotional." That did it. I stood up. "Get out before I forget I'm trying to be decent." He left with that offended little businessman walk of his. Kelsey stayed. We listened to the truck back down the gravel. "He thinks he's helping," she said after a minute. "He thinks in percentages." She flinched. I hated that she flinched. Kelsey wasn't cruel. Weak sometimes. Tired. A person can do a lot of damage just being tired and wanting the loudest person in the room to stop talking. "I'm not going anywhere," I told her. "Not this week." Not because Randy made a spreadsheet. She laughed and cried at the same time. We sat till the coffee went cold, then she left. After that, I went upstairs to Marlene's sewing room. It still smelled like that lavender drawer stuff she bought at the Amish market every fall. Half-finished quilt folded over the chair, a coffee can full of clothespins she kept for no reason anybody could explain. 3 weeks before she died, when she could still get out a whole sentence without needing a rest, she pointed at the bottom drawer of her desk and said, "After, not before, I promised." I pulled the drawer open and found a big white envelope with my name on it. Inside was a letter, a deed, a note from our attorney, Paula Creamer, and a picture. It showed a tiny white church with peeling paint and one square bell tower sitting at the edge of a field with snow around it. No bell, just the frame where one had been. Out back there was a little addition with a green metal roof and off to the side, a workshop with wide doors. On the back, she'd written, "Cashton, Wisconsin. Summer of 2012. I saved it." Marlene and her sister Bev took a trip through Wisconsin years ago. Quilting stores, junk shops, church rummage sales, all that stuff. I stayed home because Kelsey had surgery and the twins were little and Randy was, as usual, swamped. Marlene came back quieter than she left. I didn't press. I read the letter once, then again, then a third time out loud because it didn't seem real. She'd bought that deconsecrated church in 2012 with money from her Aunt Jean's estate. Her own money. Separate. Clean. Legal. She'd spent 14 years fixing it up a little at a time through a caretaker named Milo Dvorak. The back addition was living space now. Bed, stove, shower. The old sanctuary she left mostly open. The workshop beside it had tools. My tools. The Delta table saw I thought got sold at the auction. The hand plane I figured got lost in the shed clean out. The lathe from the garage, the one she said was too much mess to keep in Missouri and somehow still wound up in Wisconsin anyway. I had to stop reading for a minute. When I was 26 and we were coming back from Duluth in a rainstorm, we passed some little white church on a hill, and I said half joking if nobody needed me. I could spend the rest of my life in a place like that, making ugly tables and drinking bad coffee. I forgot saying it by the next exit. She hadn't. The letter said Randy had been looking at our house wrong for years. Said Kelsey saw it too but got worn down. Said love and exhaustion can get tangled up until a person starts calling surrender being practical. Then the part that punched a hole in me. Paula had Marlene's updated will. When I died, the farmhouse wouldn't go to Kelsey. It would go to my great-nephew, Luke. Luke was 24, worked nights at a grocery warehouse near St. Louis, and spent weekends fixing up old bicycles he found on curbs. He also collected souvenir spoons, which is maybe the most confusing hobby a man that age can have. He came to the funeral early, hauled folding chairs, stayed to the end, and washed pans without being asked. Randy left the meal early because he had a client call. I sat in that sewing room till dark. Next morning, I called Paula. She'd done our wills for years. Short woman, blunt haircut, glasses on a chain. Office smelled like toner and butterscotch candy because she kept one of those bowls nobody under 70 ever touches. Your wife was thorough, she said, laying everything out in neat stacks. That's the polite way to say she didn't trust anybody. Paula looked up. No. The polite way is that she anticipated conflict. Can they fight it? Kelsey can try. Randy can encourage her to try. The church property was purchased with separate inherited funds, titled in Marlene's name, then transferred to you through a revocable instruction package 2 years ago. Clean as a whistle. As for the farm, you own it outright now. Later disposition is your choice. Her will states a preference, not a command. But she documented her reasoning. And the mental capacity stuff. Paula snorted. Grief is not incompetence, Doug. You balance your accounts. You answer your phone. You know where you are. You are sad. That is allowed. She slid a second envelope over. This one is for the 1-year mark. She was very insistent. Of course she was. The pressure didn't stop after that. It got tidier. Kelsey came by with brochures. Randy left voicemails about timelines. He called my sister, called Luke's mother, even called Ray, which was funny because Ray told him, buddy, if Doug don't want to sell, he ain't selling. You'd have better luck arguing with a stump. The ugly part came on a Sunday. I got back from church and found Randy in my driveway with a woman holding a tablet and a kid with a drone case. I stopped by the mailbox and just looked at them. Doug, Randy said. Good. This is Melissa. She does premium listings. Tyler's just getting some exterior footage. The girl looked maybe 22 and immediately knew she'd been lied to. Get off my property. Randy spread his hands. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Melissa was already backing up. Smart girl. You brought a drone to my wife's house 3 weeks after her funeral. Our house, Kelsey said from the passenger seat of the truck, and I hadn't even seen her sitting there. That stung more than Randy. She got out slow, eyes red, hair not brushed all the way through. Dad, please don't do this out here. Then why am I doing it out here? Nobody answered. Randy started in on appreciation curves and tax bases and leveraging while options remained favorable. I let him talk. Then I said, I'm leaving in 10 days. He stopped. Leaving where? Wisconsin. Kelsey looked up. Marlene left me a place, and there it was. That little flash behind Randy's eyes where grief left the room and math entered. What kind of place? He asked. I just looked at him. He tried again. What's it worth? I laughed right in his face. That was maybe childish. Felt great. Goodbye, Randy. I called Milo the next morning. Low gravel voice. Said you bet a lot. Told me the roof was holding. He'd restacked the wood, and one stained glass panel still rattled when the wind came hard from the west, but it ain't gone yet, so leave it be. Then he said, your wife told me you'd come when you got tired enough. Tired enough. That was Marlene all over, not dramatic, specific. I told Luke that night over pork chops at the kitchen table. When I got to the part about the farm maybe going to him one day, he went dead still. Uncle Doug, I can't take your house. It's not now. Still. She had reasons. Luke pushed a green bean around his plate. When I was 15 and Mom was in rehab, I stayed here that summer. Aunt Marlene let me sleep in the room by the stairs. She made me weed the beans. Said I did it lazy. You did. He almost smiled. Anyway, he said that was the first place that ever felt quiet in a good way. Marlene kept the thank you note he wrote that summer, taped to her bulletin board for 11 years. I told him that, and he just sat there swallowing hard. There was one condition: the peonies stay. Marlene planted them by the porch, and if he ever ripped them out, I'd come back and haunt him personally. I'm not scared of your ghost, he said. You should be. I know where you hide junk food in this house. That got a laugh. I drove north on a Thursday with bad coffee and no real idea what I was doing. Milo met me there in a red knit cap and bib overalls. The place was smaller than the picture. Better too, white clapboard. Narrow windows with colored glass that threw weak little squares on the floor when the sun got right. No pews! Just open space, old pine underfoot, and in one corner, a heavy bench with tools hung neat as a pharmacy shelf. The back addition had a bed, tiny kitchen, shower stall, and a wood stove with a dent in the side. On the counter sat groceries: eggs, bacon, rye bread, a jar of pickles, and, for reasons known only to Marlene, a can of spray cheese. She loved that disgusting stuff. Milo showed me how the stove drew best with the damper half set, how the back door stuck in wet weather, and how one barn cat from next door visited when he felt like it. Name's Bishop, he said. Mean little cuss. Likes sardines. Then he left. And I was there. Just me. First thing I did was sit in the middle of the old sanctuary in a folding chair and listen. Not to angels or revelation or any of that. Just the building, tick in the stove, wind at the glass, one truck way off on the county road. Then quiet again. I cried so hard I got a cramp in my side. No speech came with it. No big lesson. Just that ugly, hiccuping kind, where your nose runs and you keep wiping it on a work glove because the tissues are in the other room and who cares? The next few days, I didn't do much. Made eggs, burned toast, walked the fence line, found every drawer in the shop labeled in Marlene's blocky handwriting: CLAMP, sandpaper, bits that still work, bits that don't but do not throw out. That one got me. Bishop the cat came by on day 3 missing half an ear and all his manners. I fed him sardines on a paper plate. By the end of the week, I'd planed one warped board flat and made a little side table crooked enough to embarrass myself. Still, it stood up. That counted. Kelsey called on the 9th day. Her voice sounded thin, like she was in a bathroom or a parked car. Randy moved into an apartment, she said. Okay, that's all you got? What do you want me to do, honey? Throw rice. Silence. Then a half laugh that died fast. He says, I'm being emotional, she said. Which is funny, since apparently that was my whole argument to you. I looked out the side window. Snow was finally pulling back from the ditch. I kept choosing him, she said. That's the part I can't stop thinking about. I kept doing it, over and over. Finally, I said, where are you right now? In the Target parking lot. That got me somehow. More than if she'd said church or a therapist, just sitting there under a red sign with a cart corral and her whole life busted open. Have you eaten? I asked. Not really. Get something. Not a candle. Food. She made a wet sound that might have been another laugh. Then she said, where are you? Wisconsin. You really went? Yep. What kind of place is it? It's an old church with no bell. Long pause. Mom bought you a church? Looks that way. Of course she did. I smiled. Yeah. She asked if she could come sometime. I said summer. She came in July. Not with the twins, not with a plan. Just one duffel bag and a face I recognized from when she was 16 and pretending not to care about a broken heart. The visit was awkward at first. They usually are. We talked about traffic and mosquitoes and the window over the sink like idiots because the real conversation was too big to pick up barehanded. Then Bishop jumped onto her lap uninvited and nearly took us both out. And that broke something loose. For 3 days we were better. Not fixed. Better. She helped me sand cabinet doors for a set I was making for nobody in particular. We went into town for brats and dish soap. She swore at a horsefly and I laughed so hard coffee came out my nose. One night, she sat on the grass and said she'd forgotten what quiet sounded like without a television in the background. We talked about Marlene in the sideways way people do when they're not ready to walk straight into the hurt. How she ate cereal dry out of a mug. How she hated those inspirational wooden signs in craft stores. How she could cuss like a mechanic if the boppin' jammed. Kelsey said, she was building this for you the whole time, wasn't she? Yeah. I stopped paying attention. She picked at a sliver on the porch rail. That's the ugly truth. I let Randy do all the talking, and after a while, it was easier to call that normal. I didn't tell her it was okay. It wasn't okay. After a minute, I said, what do you want now? She shrugged, then shrugged again. I don't know, which I hate. I'm 39. I should know. Who told you that? She looked at me. Randy, probably. Things between us didn't get healed neat. She went home, filed papers, got weirdly obsessed with baking for a month, and made one lemon cake so dense it could have hurt somebody. Then she came back in September, then October. Every visit a little less formal. Every visit one more honest sentence. Luke moved into the farmhouse the next spring. Basement apartment first, then more. He sent me pictures every week. Porch rail repainted, peonies up, tomato cages installed crooked. I split my time after that. Missouri in planting season. Wisconsin when I needed the kind of silence that doesn't ask anything from you. Milo introduced me to a guy named Vern who ran a Saturday wood shop out of an old implement shed. Vern had 3 fingers on one hand and no patience for self-pity. Perfect teacher. By Christmas, I'd made a bench that didn't wobble. By spring, I made a kitchen table for Kelsey's apartment. Plain maple. Nothing fancy. She cried when I brought it in, which annoyed her. On the first anniversary of Marlene's death, we all met at the church. Kelsey came up the night before. Luke drove in with fried chicken and a pie he swore was homemade, and nobody believed him. Bev came too, wearing the same red jacket she'd worn to the funeral because she said black washed her out and the dead wouldn't care. After supper, when the light turned gold through the side windows, I opened the second envelope Paula had given me. My hands shook. Just enough. The letter was shorter than the first one. She wrote that if I was reading it there, in that old church, then good. If I was reading it somewhere else, that was fine too, because I'd always taken the scenic route to every important thing in my life. She said she hadn't been scared while planning all this. Busy? Yes. Tired? Yes. Annoyed with me some days? Definitely. Not scared. She said Kelsey wasn't a bad person. Lost for a while? Yes. Weak in some ways, stubborn in others. Still our girl. She said she hoped I was making things with my hands again because I got mean when I didn't have a project. Everybody laughed at that, even me. Then she wrote that getting older wasn't the same as being finished, and grief didn't mean I needed handing over like a set of keys. It was just grief, bad enough on its own. Didn't need anybody dressing it up as management. At the end, she wrote, "Go make an honest mess of the time you've got left." That was Marlene. Not fancy, just direct. Nobody said much after I finished. Good. Some moments die if you talk over them. Later, after everybody turned in, I sat alone in the old sanctuary with one lamp on and looked at the colored glass on the floor. I still miss her in stupid ways. I reach for a second towel sometimes. I still buy the good peaches because she liked them. Then remember, she isn't here to tell me they're mealy. Some mornings I wake up sure I heard her in the kitchen, and it takes a second, maybe 2. Then it's just the stove ticking. The thing I know now is pretty plain. People who love you without an angle will wait while you get your legs under you. The ones who rush you usually want something. That's it. That's the whole sermon. My house is still my house. The peonies still come up. Luke sends photos like he's reporting to a foreman. Kelsey's figuring herself out in a way that's messy and late and probably more real because of that. I live part of the year in an old church with no bell. I make tables. Some are ugly. One of them split clean down the middle because I got cocky with green wood and Vern laughed at me for 10 full minutes. Fine, I can take it. Not every wound closes. Some just get quieter. And if you're sitting where I was sitting, half drowned in casseroles and paperwork and people telling you what makes sense, listen, being wrecked doesn't mean you belong to whoever talks the loudest. You still get to decide.